To truly appreciate the miracle of light within this hidden sea cave, we must first understand the epic, multi-million-year saga of its creation, a story written not in ink, but in the slow, relentless drip of acidic water and the titanic grinding of continental plates. This cave, like all sea caves, began its life not as a cavern, but as a weakness, a tiny fissure, a hairline fracture in a coastal cliff face, composed primarily of limestone. A sedimentary rock formed from the compressed skeletons of ancient marine creatures over hundreds of millions of years. Limestone is soluble. It dissolves in slightly acidic water. And where does this acid come from? From the rain itself. As rainwater falls through the atmosphere, it absorbs carbon dioxide, forming a weak carbonic acid. For eons, this acidic rainwater percolated down through the soil above the cliff, seeping into that initial crack, molecule by molecule, dissolving the calcium carbonate that held the rock together. This process, slow enough to be imperceptible over a human lifetime, is the sculptor's first patient tool. But the true master artist here is the sea. With each tidal cycle, twice a day, every day for millions of years, ocean waves slammed into the base of that cliff, exploiting that ever so slightly widened fissure. The hydraulic pressure of water being forced into the crack is immense, acting like a geological jackhammer, compressing air inside the fracture and causing it to explode outward, blasting tiny fragments of rock loose. Then, as the wave recedes, the sudden release of pressure sucks water, and those rock fragments back out, sandpapering the walls, enlarging the cavity in a brutal, rhythmic sanding process known as corrosion. Imagine this cycle repeated trillions upon trillions of times, the patient chemical dissolution from above, the violent mechanical abrasion from the front. Over millennia, the tiny fissure becomes a narrow tunnel. The tunnel widens into a chamber, and the chamber deepens and expands, carving out a space that follows the path of least resistance through the bedrock. But here's the critical, rare factor that creates our specific miracle. The cave's development was not uniform. The roof of the cave, perhaps made of a slightly harder, more resistant layer of rock, remained largely intact except in one crucial spot. In that one spot, a weaker section, perhaps a vertical joint or a patch of softer stone, succumbed to a different process collapse from above, or the persistent dripping of water from the land surface, eventually creating a vertical shaft, a skylight. This skylight is the keystone of the entire phenomenon. Its size, its angle, its very existence is a 1 in a million geological lottery ticket. The cave's interior shape is not a smooth dome, it is a record of turbulence. The walls are sculpted into swirling floats, deep potholes, and overhanging visors, all telling the direction and fury of ancient currents. Stalactites may hang from the ceiling where fresh water drips from the land above, mingling with the salt spray, creating unique biogenic formations. The floor is a collection of boulders that have fallen from the ceiling over ages, now smoothed into eerie, dimpled shapes by the lapping of the saline water. Every contour, every shadow, every echoing drip is a word in a geological sentence that took 10 million years to write. This hidden chamber is therefore a clock, a diary, and a sculpture all at once. It is a museum of Earth's patience, displaying the results of forces that are both infinitesimally gentle and cosmically powerful, forces that worked in silent concert to prepare a stage. But a stage is nothing without its star performer. And in this cavernous theater, the star is not a solid object at all, but a beam of energy that has traveled 93 million miles to make its grand daily entrance. The geological formation was merely the prelude, the construction of the grandest, most natural amphitheater on Earth, setting the scene for a performance of light that no human architect could ever hope to replicate. Now, with the stage set by geology, we witness the daily miracle, the moment sunlight pours through that opening. But to call it pouring is almost an understatement. It is a dynamic, living entity that interacts with the cave in a breathtaking display of physics. This is not the flat, even light of a sunny day outside. This is light as a tangible, sculptural substance. The phenomenon begins not at sunrise, but in the profound, absolute darkness that precedes it. Inside the cave, this darkness is a physical presence so complete it feels like a weight on your eyes. Then, as the sun crests the horizon far out at sea, its first faint rays, skimming the curve of the earth, strike the upper atmosphere and are scattered, with the blue wavelengths dispersed widely, creating the blue sky, and the longer red and orange wavelengths traveling a more direct path. This is why the first light to enter the skylight is often not a white beam, but a shaft of deep, fiery amber or rich crimson. It doesn't simply illuminate, it paints. It slices through the dusty, humid air of the cave, and here we see the Tyndall effect in its most dramatic form. The beam becomes visible itself, a solid-seeming column of glowing particles, because the cave air is filled with a microscopic misty spray aerosolized by crashing waves at the entrance, humidity condensing, and fine dust from decaying rock. Each of these tiny particles scatters the light, making the path of the beam brilliantly evident, like a spotlight through fog on a stage. As the sun climbs, the color of the beam shifts dynamically through the spectrum, from red to orange to a brilliant, blinding gold, and finally to a more neutral white tinged with aquamarine reflections from the water below. The angle of the beam is in constant, slow motion. It might initially strike a far wall, igniting a patch of mineral-rich rock into a shimmering mosaic of colors, flecks of quartz, sparkling like embedded stars, veins of iron oxide glowing like molten lava. Then, as minutes pass, the beam crawls across the chamber, its leading edge sharp and defined, revealing textures in the rock you couldn't see moments before, the ripple marks of ancient currents frozen in stone, the delicate, lace-like patterns of softer rock etched away. When the beam finally meets the water, the magic intensifies. The water's surface, often restless from subterranean tides, acts not as a mirror but as a living, kinetic projector. It refracts and reflects the light, casting a shimmering, dancing pattern of bright spots called caustics onto the cave walls and ceiling. These are not simple circles of light. They are intricate, networked patterns that swirl and pulse with the movement of every tiny wavelet, a celestial dance floor projected onto stone. The light also penetrates the water column, its intensity diminishing with depth, but revealing the astonishing clarity of the marine environment within. This submarine light show highlights suspended plankton, turning them into drifting constellations, and illuminates the sandy bottom or kelp forests below in an ethereal, blue-green glow. The acoustics of the space amplify the experience. The gentle slap of water against rock, the distant crash of waves outside funneled in, even the sound of your own breath echoes softly, accompanied by this silent visual symphony. This interplay of light, water, and air creates a phenomenon known as volumetric lighting, where you don't just see the light on surfaces, you see it occupying and defining the entire volume of the space. It transforms the cave from a static chamber into a breathing organism, its mood shifting by the second with the sun's ascent. It's a masterclass in atmospheric optics, a demonstration of how wavelength, particle scattering, reflection, and refraction can collaborate to create an experience that feels less like observing nature and more like standing inside the very machinery of beauty itself. It proves that light is not just something we see by. It is something we can see itself, a performer with the cave as its captive, awestruck audience. This hidden sea cave, bathed in its transient, magical light, is far from a sterile, beautiful tomb. It is a thriving, unique, and fragile ecosystem, a secret world within a world where life has adapted in extraordinary ways to the challenging, rhythmic conditions of semi-darkness, salinity, and tidal surge. The defining gradient of this ecosystem is light. From the bright, direct illumination directly under the skylight to the perpetual twilight at the cave's rear, and the submerged realms below, distinct zones of life exist. In the sun-splashed high noon zone beneath the opening, where fresh water drip from above mingles with salt spray, hardy lithophytic plants like algae and mosses might cling to the damp rock, creating a tiny vertical oasis. These primary producers form the base of a very specific food web in the tidal splash zone, where the walls are constantly wet and dry with the sea's breath. Communities of barnacles, limpets, and periwinkles anchor themselves with biological superglue, their shales forming a rough, living crust. They survive the crushing pressure of waves and the desiccating heat of indirect sun by closing their operculums or shells, waiting for the water's return to feed on plankton brought in by the tides. Further in, where light is diffused and reflected, specialized filter feeders dominate. Sponges of vibrant yellow, orange, and crimson coat the walls in cryptic gardens. They look like simple plants but are complex animals, pumping vast quantities of water through their bodies to extract microscopic food. Next to them, colonies of sea squirts, resembling bunches of translucent grapes, do the same. Tube worms, peeking out of calcareous homes they've built on the rock, extend feathery crowns to catch passing nutrients. But the true stars of the twilight zone are the cnidarians, delicate, ghostly white hydroids, relatives of jellyfish and sea anemones, form lacy, fern-like colonies that wave gently in the subterranean currents. They pack stinging cells to paralyze tiny prey, a stark contrast to their elegant appearance. In the perpetually dark recesses, beyond the reach of all but the faintest reflected photons, life shifts from photosynthesis to chemosynthesis and predation. Blind, pale shrimp and scavenging isopods scuttle over the silty bottom, feeding on organic detritus that washes in. Strange, translucent worms burrow in the sediment. And in the water column, the cave becomes a nursery and refuge. Small fish like blennies and gobies dart in the dim light, hiding from open water predators. Juvenile octopuses might find a temporary home in crevices, their chromatophores flickering nervously even in the dark. The cave's roof might host a colony of bats whose guano, rich in nitrogen, washes down and fertilizes the aquatic environment, linking the terrestrial and marine worlds. This entire ecosystem operates on a rhythm dictated by the tides and the sunbeam. Feeding times are synchronized with high tide, when the ocean replenishes the larder of plankton. Reproductive cycles are timed to lunar phases. The daily traverse of the light beam dictates algal growth patterns and the behavior of light-sensitive creatures. It's a perfectly balanced, exquisitely adapted microcosm. However, its isolation is its strength and its vulnerability. This ecosystem evolved in near-pristine conditions. The introduction of a single pollutant, a drop of oil, a careless touch that kills a sponge colony, or an invasive species hitchhiking on an explorer's gear could devastate this delicate balance. The cave is a living lesson in biodiversity and interdependence, proving that, even in the most hidden, seemingly inhospitable corners of our planet, life not only finds a way it flourishes with breathtaking ingenuity and fragile beauty. The profound beauty and hidden nature of such a sea cave have inevitably woven it into the fabric of human imagination, history, and mythology long before it was ever documented on a map or a YouTube video. For coastal indigenous communities, such caves were rarely just geological features. They were liminal spaces, portals between worlds, imbued with deep spiritual significance. They might have been seen as the dwelling places of deities, spirits of the ocean, or ancestors. The dramatic light beam could have been interpreted as a bridge to the heavens, a divine eye, or a pathway for souls. These caves, often featured in creation myths as the birthplace of a clan from the womb of the Earth Mother, or as the place where a cultural hero emerged or descended into the underworld. The echoing acoustics would have amplified chants and drum beats, making them ideal for ceremonial use, their secrecy ensuring the sanctity of rituals. In later centuries, along more treacherous coastlines, such hidden caves became the stuff of sailors' legend and pragmatic use for pirates and smugglers. A sea cave with a concealed entrance was the perfect treasure vault or hiding spot for contraband and ships. The play of light might have served as a natural signal or a terrifying spectacle for initiates. Stories of haunted caves, guarded by monsters or ghosts, were often encouraged to keep the curious away from operational hideouts. For fishermen and early mariners, these caves were landmarks and sometimes shelters from sudden storms, though their treacherous entrances and rising tides made them dangerous sanctuaries. The Victorian era of exploration and romanticism saw such places through a different lens, as sublime manifestations of nature's power and beauty, capable of inspiring both awe and terror. Poets and painters who might never have visited one described analogous groves as places of transcendental experience, the actual physical. Discovery of a specific cave, like ours in the modern era, often comes from a blend of local knowledge and adventurous exploration. A fisherman mentions a strange sound or reflection to a child, a coastal hiker notices an anomalous draft, or a peculiar pattern of waves, or a kayaker dares to paddle closer to a seemingly solid cliff face. The modern explorer, armed with waterproof lights, safety gear, and GPS, still feels the same primal rush as those first mythmakers, the heart-pounding mix of fear and wonder when crossing the threshold from the known world into the whispering darkness. Today, our relationship with such places is paradoxical. Technology allows us to find and share them with the world through videos like this one, democratizing awe, but this very act threatens their secrecy and fragility. The human urge to discover, to put a name on a map, to photograph and share, clashes with the cave's essence, which is rooted in its hidden, untouched nature. We must now wrestle with the new mythology, the ethics of discovery in the digital age. Should such coordinates be widely published? Does filming a sacred, fragile space preserve it or condemn it? This cave, therefore, stands not just as a natural wonder, but as a mirror to humanity itself, reflecting our spiritual yearnings, our thirst for adventure and resource, our artistic inspiration, and now, our profound responsibility. It challenges us to be not just discoverers, but guardians, not just spectators, but humble participants in a story much larger than ourselves. As our journey inside this hidden sea cave draws to a close, we must step back and consider its deepest meaning, which transcends geology, physics, biology, and history. This cave is, ultimately, a powerful metaphor for the hidden wonders that still exist on our planet and within our own lives. Just as the cave's grandeur was invisible from the outside, concealed behind a facade of ordinary rock, so too are countless marvels both in nature and in the human experience, hidden in plain sight, waiting for a shift in perspective, a beam of attention to reveal their true splendor. The sunlight pouring through the opening is a metaphor for awareness, for knowledge, for that moment of insight that transforms the unknown and frightening into the known and beautiful. It represents the breakthrough, creative, personal, or scientific, that illuminates a dark, confused space and reveals its inherent structure and beauty. The cave's ecosystem is a metaphor for resilience and delicate interdependence, showing how life adapts to the most specific and challenging niches, a lesson for our own communities and the biosphere at large. But the most urgent metaphor is one of fragility and guardianship. This cave, with its perfect, precarious balance of light, life, and silence, is a microcosm of Earth itself, a fragile, isolated, breathtakingly beautiful system that has evolved in precise equilibrium. The beam of light is temporary. As the sun moves, the golden hour fades, and the cave returns to shadow. This reminds us that moments of revelation, beauty, and ecological stability are not permanent. They are daily gifts, contingent on the consistent, cyclical functioning of a much larger system. We are living in an age where we possess the tools to illuminate every last hidden cave on the planet, to broadcast their beauty to billions. But with this power comes a grave responsibility. Will our illumination be like the gentle, revealing sunbeam that shows the cave's splendor without harming it? Or will it be the harsh, invasive glare of permanent lights the scrapes of careless footfall, the pollution of our presence that destroys the very thing we love. The call to action is clear and twofold. First, for the natural world, support marine conservation organizations, advocate for the protection of coastal and karst landscapes. Practice leave no trace principles obsessively if you are ever blessed enough to visit such a place, and remember that some wonders are best protected by cherished secrecy, not by geotagging. Second, and just as importantly, look for the hidden caves in your own life. Seek out the overlooked beauty in your local environment, be it a patch of moss, a stream, or the way light falls in a room at a certain hour. Nurture the fragile ecosystems of your relationships, your creativity, and your community. Be a guardian of quiet, unspoiled spaces, both external and internal. This hidden sea cave with sunlight pouring through an opening is more than a location. It is a state of mind. It is an invitation to embrace wonder, to respect mystery, to understand profound interconnectedness, and to choose the gentle path of stewardship over the careless path of consumption. If this journey into light and shadow resonated with you, then your next step is crucial. Become part of a community that values depth over distraction. Smash that like button. It's the simplest way to tell the algorithm that content about profound natural wonders matters. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because this channel is dedicated to unearthing more of Earth's hidden stories, from forgotten ecosystems to unseen phenomena, and I don't want you to miss a single exploration. Share this video with one person you think needs a dose of awe today. Spark a conversation about the hidden wonders in your own part of the world. Most importantly, leave a comment below. Tell me, what is your hidden sea cave? What overlooked marvel, either in nature or in your personal journey, feels like a secret, illuminated chamber to you? Your stories fuel this channel's mission. And finally, if you feel moved to directly support the preservation of fragile, real-world places like the one we imagine today, I've linked to several vetted marine and cave conservation organizations in the description below. Consider donating, volunteering, or simply spreading their message. The true discovery isn't just finding a hidden cave, it's realizing we are all its guardians. Thank you for watching, for wondering, and for choosing to explore deeply.